And we're back. Welcome to No Direction Beyond, your Starfinder news, reviews, and interviews podcast. I'm your host, Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Parent. I'm joined with my host, Alexander Agunas, and James here at Code Switch. We're also joined by a very special guest today, and we also have to disclose someone who is a recent advertiser on the network, Lou Agresta, who is here to join us to talk about PaizoCon and, more importantly, Grimmerspace. Hey, Lou!
Hello!
So, I guess the big news that everybody is talking about, besides Grimmerspace breaking $100,000 on Kickstarter as of like 5 minutes ago or 20 minutes ago?
5 minutes ago.
Yeah. So, first, congratulations.
Thank you.
And we will be talking about why this thing is exciting, why we wanted to have you on the show. And we honestly did want to have you on the show. Do not be confused, audience. The advertisement deal came through after we wanted Lou on the show. But we just came back from PaizoCon. PaizoCon was a week ago. How did you all enjoy your PaizoCons? I know you were there, Lou.
Rona and I were both there.
Mm-hmm.
Boosting Grimmerspace, running games, throwing a party, touching base with fans, and having a grand old time.
Excellent, excellent. Now, Alex, you had a great PaizoCon. You put a blog up about it.
I lived for the stream. I died for the stream.
Yes, for those of you who do not know, and I don't know how you don't know if you've been tuned into this network any amount of time, No Direction had partnered officially with Paizo to live broadcast PaizoCon throughout the entirety of the event. You probably saw me and Alex there for about 30-some hours of podcasting consistently. It was a bit of an endeavor. James, you were not able to join us in Seattle.
No, but that's okay. There was enough of you guys there.
Mm-hmm.
He was too busy building Dwarven Forge. Look at that splendid tower in the background.
Yeah, there was 2 bits of Starfinder news that we'll go into very briefly. First is that they announced the next adventure path, which is the Trifold Conspiracy, which is about the unseen and greys and lizard folk, reptiloids. And
it's a big difference.
Yeah, very big difference. Ones live in the swamp and hit things with clubs, and the others bring down our governments from within. And finally, there was, of course, the news about the second seeker, first seeker situation, which we will talk about in an upcoming episode, hopefully with guests involved in that. But
dun dun dun.
The other big thing that happened at PaizoCon was, Lou, you all had this huge party that was pretty much everybody was asking, are you going to the Grimmerspace party? When are you going to get to the Grimmerspace party? What was this Grimmerspace party?
So the Grimmerspace party was Roan and I launching Grimmerspace, and we set up the party long before we launched the Kickstarter. We had to because of the timing, so we really didn't know if it was going to be a celebration or a funeral. We were confident it would be a celebration, but in your heart you've always got that anxiety. So I was also preparing for, Roan brought out all these specialty drinks and had things designed by a Westchester mixologist who's won awards, and we made 2 drinks that were, or he made and designed 2 drinks that were signature, supposed to be from the Vatican Empire, one of our polities, a place where players can come from in Grimmerspace, and all this equipment. And I just had these nightmares. I'd wake up at like 2 a.m. going, I'm going to be drinking a lot of those Voti Volcanoes by myself. But no, not at all. It was raging success.
That was definitely not a problem, because Mike Sayer and I from Paizo tried to get into the party, and we were like, this room is too full. There's no way this is happening. We sat on the outside and we're like, oh, this is the existential horror that they promised me, isn't
it? Yeah, I mean, all kudos to Roan. He did an amazing job. He actually carried a smoker out from New York to Seattle, which cooks like Applewood makes smoke while your drink sits in it. He brought that whole thing himself, set the whole thing up. We brought along a lot of the things that we're offering, examples of stuff that we're offering in the Kickstarter, posters, like 2 or 3 posters, a model weapon from the game, videos from Sean Astin, because he was at a convention in France, so he couldn't Skype in, which was the original plan. So we had some videos of him to show, and just give people a taste of Grimmerspace, and say thank you for helping us launch so successfully.
Now, we usually don't like to do episodes about a Kickstarter that is in progress. But there's something about Grimmerspace. You guys have been pitching this and advertising this for over a year now, like before the Kickstarter even launched. It's got Sean Astin involved. The production value of just the materials you've put out there are kind of trumping everything else on the market. It's kind of insane how good the production values of just like a free adventure you put out on Drive-Thru RPG. And this has got a lot of hype. This has got a lot of news, especially in the Starfinder community, which has some good third-party support, but nowhere near as robust as, say, Pathfinder or 5th edition has. This is sort of like the Titanic setting sail. But, of course, let's hope it ends a little bit better.
Bad analogy.
Come on, Baron. You can do better than that.
Well, I mean, to be completely fair, when I kept seeing ads for this thing coming out for a Kickstarter that hadn't started, I had wondered if it had Titanic, but it sounds like not at all, especially since the Kickstarter, like we just said, passed $100,000 just a little while ago. So how are you feeling? It's launched. I know you were stressed out. How are you feeling about how it's being received by the community?
I'm amazed about how it's being received by the community. Thrilled that our collective dream, Roan's and mine, caught fire, not only in our imaginations but in everyone else's. It caught fire in Sean's when we showed it to him. We initially thought we were going to launch much sooner than we could, because we got a big dose of reality about how difficult it would be to launch a big Kickstarter. But it was a good dose of reality. It gave us the time to really, as Roan often says, dream ourselves into the setting and bring things to life. It gave us time to find the exact right artists. In a lot of ways, I'm going to do this a lot because he couldn't join us at the moment, but Roan is our artistic director, and it was his exacting eye and demand for excellence and perfection and a unified look to Grimmerspace that I think is responsible for those high production values. Yeah. I mean, yes, I was involved too, but his is the visual eye in a lot of ways.
Yeah. We should mention that Roan Barton was going to join us for this episode, but right before the episode started, there were some technical difficulties that we were unable to overcome before the episode became too late to start. We do regret that, and Roan, if you're listening, we really am missing you. Okay, so for the people who do not know what Grimmerspace is, can you tell them about this? It's a setting, it's an adventure compendium. What is it?
So Grimmerspace is Starfinder like you've never seen it before. It's science fiction horror, and it's about a ripping space-time through which dark evil wizards come into a science-only universe for the first time. But that science-only universe, or galaxy really, called Grimmerspace, or the Gliding Rim Galaxy, G-Rim Grimmer, is a place where they've been fighting alien facehugger horrors since they first set foot into space. And these wizards show up, and they look around and say, no magic. It's going to be easy. And the Grimmers turn around after they get used to that idea, and they're like, oh, really? How about I shoot you in the head? How about that? And so we're pitting science fantasy against science fiction. And the connection, depending on how you want to play it, the connection can go back to the default Starfinder setting. So we're connecting the default Starfinder setting to a science-only horror universe into which magic is seeping for the first time.
Now, why did you
Awesome.
guys go? Oh, sorry, James.
Oh no, go ahead, Pam. I think you're about to ask the same question I was.
So, why did you decide to go with a science, a pure hard science for the Grimmer half of this, whereas a lot of the support for Starfinder has been embracing the fantasy elements?
Well, Roan and I got in an argument.
Oh, okay.
is we had some material we were looking at and wondering whether we could kickstart or whether it was suitable for Grimmer Space, and we looked at it and there was not as much there as we'd hoped, and so we started spitballing and brainstorming and coming up with things, and we sort of got in a conflict about whether or not pure sci-fi and a hard sci-fi was better than science fantasy. And I started saying that, well, there are, he started pointing out that weren't a lot of examples in successful fiction where science fantasy happened. It was all hard sci-fi. And I started saying, well, I don't know if that's exactly the case. There's Hero's Journey by Sterling E. Lanier. There's The High Crusade by Poul Anderson. There's even the Splendid Infinity stuff by Piers Anthony. We started going back and forth about this. And then Roan had the idea, well, why don't we not decide which is better? Batman can too beat up Superman. We were kind of like in that place.
Mhm.
And so instead, we said, well, why don't we pit them together against each other in one setting and let the people who play it decide how it pans out. And Roan had the brainchild of connecting two universes like that so it could happen. And how we would do that, we then spun together.
Okay. My question was, I've been seeing stuff for Grimmer Space for a while, and using the Starfinder rule setting, which is pretty new. What was the inspiration with going for that? Did you ever look at other systems beforehand?
We did. We thought about that, but Roan and I have written most of the things that we've written over the past decade in Pathfinder. And I mean, he's published outside of Pathfinder. I have a little too, Call of Cthulhu. But our deepest familiarity, certainly our deepest familiarity as collaborators. I mean, between us, we've written, edited, developed like 2 million words or something, and won awards and all that kind of stuff. But it was the deep familiarity with Pathfinder, and the Starfinder rules at the time were pretty new. So the originality and the newness of that appealed. And we know lots of folks in that realm. You mentioned earlier third-party support. Well, the other third-party companies that are out there have supported us very strongly in helping us get the word out. And there's a strong community there of third-party developers and publishers who help each other. And so knowing that we could rely on that help and that expertise was a big part of the decision. And then we partnered up with Modiphius Entertainment as our worldwide distribution partner. And Chris Birch over there has deep expertise with Kickstarters. And then we hooked up with the Gamerati to help us run the Kickstarter, making sure that we had a strong support base, I guess, is the bottom line. That was a lot of words to give you a short answer. Because we know people.
That's a good reason. Stuff doesn't get done by itself.
Yeah.
Exactly. It takes a village.
And speaking of the people you know, besides you, Roan, and more famously also, or as famously, or super famously, Sean Austin's participation, you've actually got a pretty all-star cast working on this product.
That's right. That's another part of knowing people. So many luminaries in the industry that we respect were willing to donate their time, their energy, and their effort, and become part of the project. It's one of those things at a certain level when you're some of the level of these freelancers like Shannon Germain or Owen, Casey Stevens, or Ben McFarlane, like all of them basically, Jason Bullman, they've got more projects than they know what to do with. And so even if you're hiring them to do the work, the fact that they choose you over someone else to be hired by is a gift. And so we're very fortunate in that respect.
So you mentioned, therefore, this isn't a campaign setting. This isn't an adventure path. This is something that is both. Why did you guys go with this particular kind of shotgun approach to the product?
A couple of reasons. It was primarily driven by what Starfinder fans were saying they wanted and needed. And then it became something that we said, well, here's a really cool way to turn this into a feature. And here's what I mean by that. People were saying that they didn't, even now, they're saying that there's not a huge call for more player options, because there's lots of player options in Starfinder that are yet to be explored and that are coming out now. And so what there was a big call for was setting support, tools for GMs to invent and create their own things. So what we decided to do was make a very modularized approach. There's a setting, and that's half the book. And the other half of the book is adventures. Every single location in the setting book has a small adventure to explore it. So we can optimize what will be there in encyclopedia form and maximize what you can experience as your way to, learn more about the Grimmerspace setting. And with 14 different locations or special events and 14 different adventures of different sizes, we then created 2 more tools, an intensity meter and types of horror. Roan is a cinephile and very well versed in horror. He's written a whole brilliant essay that I'm going to encourage him to publish outside of this on what is horror, and particularly what is horror, space horror, or what is horror in Grimmerspace, that we give to the writers to say, here's how you should do your horror. Well, that's given us 15 different kinds of horror. So every adventure is going to say it contains this horror type, and that contains body horror and cosmic horror, and a little bit of psychological horror for this adventure. The intensity is high, medium, or low, or whatever our ratings are, and here's why, because this is what's in it. And you get one of 3 lengths. 2 or 3 sessions, 1 to 2 sessions, 1 session. And then you can really dial in on what you want to play and experience. And it also lets you just pull it out, plug and play, plop it in your own stuff if that's what you prefer to do with it. So that was the design goal, to make it as broadly useful to multiple play types as possible.
Now, why horror to go with as the really strong genre for this?
Why not? Because we're dark and twisted souls. No, because it wasn't being done. Because there's a real affinity and an ability to explore the darker side of human nature and the darker side of modernity when you are stepping into science fiction, or science fantasy for that matter. So the notion was, Lou's personal theory in fiction and in multiple art forms is that we cloak and dream what we have a hard time looking at face on. And that's one of the purposes or uses of fiction, including the kind we create together at the table. And horror lets us look a little closer and be a little less distant from it. And it was such a stark contrast to the very Guardians of the Galaxy flavor I feel that the default Starfinder setting has, which I love. But it made a great contrast.
So, what are some of the experiences that players who come into Grimmerspace are going to be able to have that you wouldn't have in a traditionally run Starfinder game?
Blood?
Okay.
No, quite a few. Like I said, 15 different kinds of horror that we hope to explore. So that creates a lot of options that might not normally be present. In Abattoir 8, for example, we've got the free adventure that we're giving away. You've got your gang is going to your party's going to visit a suborbital meat processing or an orbital meat processing plant that's gone dark. What could possibly go wrong? So there's an intensity or a seriousness that you can explore if you want to. You're going to in the Adian Combine. There are one of our polities or star nations is called the Adian Combine. Um, it's covered in arcologies, each of which holds the population of the United States or more, reaches to the stratosphere, and looks like jewels from space. But it's really the place where the worst possible wealth inequality exists. So you can get a Judge Dredd kind of thing there, the raid. You could have an entire campaign in an arcology if that's what you want to do, and never leave. Um, I think there's a whole raft of experiences that I think of film when I think of Event Horizon, Pitch Black, these kinds of films. Um, what was the Overlord? What was that recent World War II horror movie?
Mhm.
Or A Dark Song, if you've ever seen that horror movie. It's an indie horror movie. You're going to get to explore a lot of this kind of material. And then, of course, we've created, we were forced to create by the material itself, character classes that are unique and different because there's starting at least no magic.
So tell me a little bit about that. How did you make Starfinder playable without involving the magic elements? I'm sure you had to shore up some of the party support.
Yes. So again, this is part of our design philosophy of letting people dial into exactly what they want to play and making that not quite sandbox, but putting the tools in the GM's hand to do exactly what they want to do. And here's what I mean by that. Magic is coming into the universe for the first time. You can play Starfinder characters who have, from the default Starfinder role-playing game setting, that's how my license requires me to say it.
Mhm.
You can play characters who have been sort of Ravenlofted into Grimmer Space,
Mm-hmm.
if you will. You can play characters who have been brought there for reasons that they don't know why. You can play characters who are the children of those who were Ravenlofted or found themselves for unknown reasons in the Grimmer Space end of the galaxy. Their parents lived there long enough, settled down, had kids, the kids grew up, and now they're Vesk or Yusoki or whatever. But they've known nothing but the Crux, which is our center of civilization. You can play Grimmers,
Mhm.
who either are in a place where there is no magic at all, if you want, or you can play Grimmers who are beginning to experience these strange magical things coming up, and they don't know what it is. But they've got powers, and boy, isn't that interesting. And in order to support this many different options or styles of play, we have areas of the Crux that are more magically influenced by the appearance of our big bad, the Sunder Mages. And I should probably back up. Here's what happens. There's a tear in space-time, and out of this purple tear in space-time called the Seed come these beings called the Sunder Mages. And magic comes with them. So near that tear in space-time is where magic begins. So depending on where you want to play in the timeline, magic has spread to a greater or lesser degree into the Grimmer Space or Gliding Rim Galaxy. Then there's also something called Mote. Mote is a drug. You get it in a monocular, and you inject it in your eye.
Oh, well, that sounds
And-
terrible.
Yes, but it's briefly painful, Param. After that, it's awesome. It's like the best party drug ever. Except it also carries with it magic. And for various setting secret reasons, people are getting magic through this drug, and you can load up on this for a number of times per spellcasting per day and carry this ubiquitous drug around with you. So magic is also at a certain point in the timeline, it becomes portable. And so length of session, modularity of location, intensity of horror, um, kinds of horror, degree of magic per the various ways of the Grimmer Space timeline, all in your hands. These are all like knobs on a panel, and as a GM, you can go, I'll set this one to here, and this one to 11, and this one to 4. You know, like that. That's the design principle.
Now, one of the things I'm curious about is if magic is coming in, like just now coming in from these Thunder Mages, and with it this terrible horror. Is magic very well regarded in this setting? Or there's like fleets of anti-magic hunting squads?
There can be. Again, it depends on the point in the timeline, and we have not part of this Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
We have in mind a kind of AP for the Grimmer Space Galaxy. But we don't want to set that into canon. We want people to play it out the way they want to play it out. So initially, magic is a source of horror. If all you've known is science and then the undead rise up and start fighting you, that's kind of freaky, right? That's a little like, what the heck, right? And then it will come into play. What you've actually hit on is what is the begging of the question that the entire setting revolves around. Is magic going to play out to be a good thing? Is it going to be introduced to the Grimmer Space world and become part of it? Are the Grimmers simply going to identify it as an enemy and fight it off? That is actually the very question we want people to play and resolve. Bullets versus fireballs, or do I co-opt this thing that other people are scared of and make it my own and turn it to only use my powers for good? Again, that's what we want the players to decide and how they play it out. Initially, it'll be scary because it's new, it's unknown, and we use it as a source of horror in many cases. And there's things I want to tell you, but I can't.
Right. Well, you mentioned that the Thunder Mages are one of the people bringing it in, and they're not bringing it in with a kind agenda. They're not, hey, here's some magic cookies, welcome to the neighborhood. They seem to be quite sinister.
In the eye, yeah. Well, they are, and I should probably take a second to explain the cosmology of the galaxy. It's set up like a vortex, it's set up like a vortex, and the top of the vortex, if you think of that as like a plate, the center of that is the crux. That's where civilization is. The outer edge of that plate is the edge. And that's where things get strange, darker, weirder, more difficult. The history of the crux is about pushing civilization out from the center toward the edge, trying to establish colonies with lesser or greater success. Everything below is called the gyre. And no one goes into the gyre and comes out sane or ever comes out. Or if they come out, they claim to be your friend, but they're probably not anymore. The gyre is where there be dragons. Okay. Enough of that boring background. Things come out of the gyre, and at the time that the game opens, when you get this core book, an entire species has migrated out of the gyre, and they're called the Hodrak. And they bump into the Thunder Mages. And whether by careful, deliberate craft on the part of the Thunder Mages or by fate, many of the Hodrak's prophecies about what will protect them from what's driving them out of the gyre match the Thunder Mage description. And so this entire warlike species of bone-plated, scrimshawed up, radiation-resistant, overclocked fusion weapon warrior clans declare themselves for the Thunder Mages. And so the Thunder Mages wind up with an army. So no, they're not nice.
Okay, and and that also sounds terrible. It's worth noting that this game has some of the best, or this setting has some of the best art I've seen in a third-party product. If you go to the website for Grimmer Space, you'll see a lot of animated art pieces, and the Butcher, I think, is his name, with the
Yes.
overly bloated man with the
Big
gigantic,
boy Trask.
with the gigantic I defeated the Doom guy in his own video game Saw Blade. That thing
Blades, two of them.
Oh, he has more than one. Oh, wonderful. It makes me wonder how he scratches his own nose, I guess, carefully. But it definitely does lean very heavy on its art to sell it. How did you justify the budget to put this book together?
Well, at the end of the day, Roan and I poured our life savings into this. That's what happened.
Oh,
You know,
Hey,
there's
Joe's.
your answer.
wow. Oh,
Ooh.
I don't usually hear that
And-
often from our guests, but well, I'm glad you passed
that's what-
$100,000 on Kickstarter.
Yes. Oh, am I?
Um,
You know, Sean donated his time.
mhm.
You know, he went into, among other things, as creative developer, he went into the studio and he shot like 5 hours of film with us to help us promote. But all of it is really coming out of Roan's and my resources.
Mhm.
At the same time, Roan is extremely good at identifying that just special something in an artist, and then getting them to fall in love with our setting. So a lot of the artists gave us at least a little bit of a sweetheart deal. And everything that we had created promotionally, all is intended and will be used in the books. So they're doing marketing. It's not like we spent this huge amount of marketing that's never going to have a use in publication.
Well, I mean, it's good art. It should go in a book.
Yeah.
True story.
Now, the other... Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was going to say also, just looking over Kickstarter pages, I really like enemy cards and ally cards. Numenera has something similar, and I think that is one of the best ways to get people to look at enemies and quick reference. I just like that. Sorry, go ahead, Pam.
Okay. You mentioned Sean Austin's participation. It's very obvious what you and Roan are bringing to the table, and you've got this slew of all-star contributors and artists. What is Sean Austin's role exactly?
He's a creative developer, and in tabletop RPGs, developer is a very important role. They're basically the person that the writers hand in their first drafts to, and then get the proper feedback for A, bringing everything into line and continuity with the whole of the setting, and B, getting the creative feedback that pushes them to the next level. And Sean is a creative powerhouse. You know, in addition to the famous acting roles he's been in, he's been nominated for an Oscar for his directing and his writing, and he's just really incredible. So we send him the material. He reads through it. Sometimes we get on a phone conversation with him. Sometimes it's all written, and he gives us feedback. And that feedback will be along the lines of, this isn't really exciting. What if we did this instead? Could you talk to the writers about this? I think it would be more cinematic if it looked like that, or, and he's already shaping our setting. And one of the many pieces of feedback we got from him was, these names, they don't sound like empires. They sound like the places inside of empires. How do we make them more powerful? Because that really affects people. And then we would brainstorm that a little. So it's that kind of creative feedback. And so our video says, Sean goes, I'm there to make sure everything has this cinematic punch. And that's really what he's there for, to look at all the material and amp the creativity level.
Now, speaking of some of the things to amp the creativity, some of the tech you're introducing, for instance, at the beginning of Avatar 8, the most dangerous form of space travel I've ever heard of happens, where the party is literally put into a ball and slingshot across space towards, hopefully, their destination.
Yes, slingshot ferries. So, two things that I think are we use as guiding principles. And Rona's always smacking me to make sure I stay within the color within the lines here. Um, all the polities have their own unique flavor. So slingshot ferries are from the Adian Combine, and they grow out of the nature of that place. And every time we do anything in one of those polities, the question is always, where's the horror? You can't just, this is a junkyard planet. Yeah, that's not good enough. Where's the horror? Right. So in this particular case, the Adian Combine, they have an overpopulation problem. And so they're the polity that's always trying to colonize the most. And their approach to colonization is send a bunch of colonists. They didn't survive, send more. Send more up to the point when it's cheaper to actually send equipment. Because it has the benefit of, it's a win-win. Either the population goes down or we get a colony. And so they are the place that creates the slingshot ferry, which is essentially a giant shipping container with some air stuck in it and some netting to hang in. And then it goes in a giant rail gun and gets launched at its destination. Hopefully the computers get the trajectory right. And when it arrives, the gravitics there will grab it, turn it around, and land it. And it's typically used to ship migrant workers, colonists, and cattle, or the equivalent of cattle. We don't use any earth animals. Something Roan insisted on very early, and as usual, spot on. So yeah, it's downright terrifying and usually messy.
You don't use any.
But
oh, sorry.
No, but you wouldn't find that in a place like the Somnium Meld, which is another one of our polities where everyone is data jacked together in a giant network for the purposes of research and development. That place will look almost Star Trek-y in its cleanliness, and it would never have something like a slingshot ferry. And the question there becomes, where's the horror? And it's in a totally different kind of place.
You mentioned not using any earth animals. What are the species that the players may play there? Is it just the Starfinder crew, or have you expanded?
No, we've expanded, and so what happens is, we started out with the mission of few or no player options. People don't want that. But then when you really create something that's as real or living as you can make it, you have to create player options. And so we embrace that where it's necessary. And so every single one of the polities is a variant human species. Some of the varying so drastic that they might as well be alien or close to it. In addition, there's a race that came out of the Gyre, or the remnants of one, called the Joom, who are extraordinary at working in zero G, and that's also a playable race. So you've got these 5 different human variants. You have the Joom. I think there's another one that I'm not remembering at the moment. And then, of course, all of your Starfinder races as well.
Alex, as our resident third-party and freelancer expert, well, you have to have some insight in this crazy endeavor.
What kind of insight specifically?
As in,
are we talking about the fact that it's officially the highest grossing Starfinder third-party product there is right now? Because that's true. That's very, very, very true. I don't think Legendary Games came close with any of their Kickstarters.
Although I love Legendary Games stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, and it's not meant to be like a stab against them, but like a lot of what Legendary is doing right now is they are their campaign setting is very Sword and Planet, like the old Paizo novels. They're doing I think it's called Legendary Planets, literally. So like it's a very different flavor that you don't really see. Like the closest I've ever gotten to horror is that I did a corruption rules set for Everyman Gaming, but like it's something that's very new and it's very different, and I think a lot of us are just sort of like we're watching and we're waiting to see what happens, because even Pathfinder didn't have a third-party campaign setting that has just the scope of what Grimmer Space is, you know what I mean? Like, you'll have something like that's a little bit of a smaller, maybe a one-shot book, but nobody that went to Kickstarter and got $100,000 off of it. Yeah. So I think for a lot of us, it's just new territory. Like we're like, whoa.
I think we got um, it's part luck, it's part help
Hmm.
from all the people that are our friends and have been so amazingly supportive. Rogue Genius Games, Right Publishing, Gaming Paper, um, Monty Cook Games, uh, Dale McCoy over at Brazier Enterprises, Lewis Porter Jr. Someone's gonna get pissed at me because I've forgotten. Can get angry at me? Excuse me, because I've forgotten, to list them as I'm sitting here panicking, trying to make sure I get everyone. Evil Robot Games. I mean, the third party community came out for us, and I've got nothing but gratitude for that, and hope to return the favors.
Hmm.
But I think we hit a chord. I think the note that we hit is that same note I was saying earlier about science fiction and science fantasy, Star Wars even lets you look a little more closely at the real world and a little less distantly from it. And people wanted something, they wanted the horror. They wanted something that could be more serious or more terrifying or more um, dark and gonzo, whatever their particular flavor is. They wanted something slightly more adult. We think of ourselves as 13 plus, and we're going to walk right up to the edge of R without towing over that line.
All right, so we're coming up on time for the episode. I am wondering when it sounds like you guys have already done a tremendous amount of work. The art that we already see. There's these newsreel commercials that are coming out fairly frequently that are
Grimmer Space News. There's
Yes.
more coming. There'll be another one soon.
Yeah, so I definitely
Rona
recommend.
and I don't do.
I definitely recommend our audience check that out if this is interested in you at all. There's also the free Abattoir 8 adventure to check it out on. When do you think, when the Kickstarter wraps up, when is this going to hit shelves?
We've been very conservative. We've given ourselves a year for most of it. Some of it will probably come sooner. And we've given ourselves that time frame because we don't want to miss delivery. Also, I'll leak here on No Direction, depending on how far we get on our stretch goals, and depending on what the community of backers wants, we might look to significantly expand the player option side of Grimmer Space if the demand is there. And so we wanted to make sure from the get that we had plenty of space to deliver on time. So we're under promising and over delivering is kind of the goal. So we set it for a year. Does that mean that I'm going to wait to the last? Rona, I want to wait to the last second on everything? Oh, heck no. We're going to try to deliver the quality as quickly as possible.
All right. So there are 18 days left on the Kickstarter as of the date of this recording, probably 15 by the time our audio listeners are hearing this. So you can check that out over if you search for Grimmerspace on Kickstarter or go to grimmerspace.com. Any shout outs that you want to make, Lou, about anything you're participating in or Grimmerspace, or how people can find out more about it?
Oh, sure. Well, like you said, if you hit grimmerspace.com, it will take you to the Kickstarter page. If you go into the updates, you'll find the Grimmerspace news updates. You'll also find those on our facebook.com/IronGMGames, or you could join the Grimmerspace Facebook group at facebook.com/Grimmerspace. Both of these will give you access to the more entertaining parts of the Kickstarter. And every update we do with a Grimmerspace news, where Sean plays the character Vic-26, reporting on news from Grimmerspace, and Ron and I are the hapless reporters who things don't work out so well for. Every update will have the back episodes of that in it, so that you can see those there.
All right. Thank you. Any other shout outs from James or Alex?
No, I'm boring this week.
Yeah, no, I'm
But you're
still...
cute.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, No, I don't think there's anything super exciting on my front coming out soon. Oh no, I'm doing.
Liar.
I just remembered. This Thursday is my silly micro-sized adventures for Starfinder product. It's called a Colts. It's called a Cult Skill Guide size changing rules. It's all about playing Honey I Shrunk the Kids in Starfinder. It's great.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
Okay, so I'm gonna
That's great.
channel.
We gotta
Lou
talk.
here. So where's the horror?
Where's the horror? All over the art. One of the cover images is like our iconic crew characters running away from a Roomba.
That's great.
It's great.
That's great. We've got a horror comedy category.
Yeah, no, I think that'll do it. It's pretty funny. It also has rules for like if you want to have super colossal creatures, which are creatures that are larger than the colossal size category. If you want to make like Godzilla and stuff, and it comes with a sidebar that tells you how to convert the super colossal creature into a starship, so that you can fight it with your starship and still lose that way too.
Are these open game license?
Yep, everything I do is open game license, so you could absolutely use it. I
Because
do.
we got Larry Elmore to write a monster, because he's also a really good sci-fi writer. He wrote a monster, and then being Larry Elmore, he had to draw it. And what he wrote was like this gigantic space worm dragon.
Oh,
thing
that sounds
called
great.
the Kyrag. And you can see it on the Kickstarter site. There's actually that piece of art is part of a single pledge level. But I'm thinking about the rules that I have yet to write for that giant thing, and I'm thinking maybe I don't have to.
Maybe you could just be like, "Hey, look at this book." I actually, James would be super proud of me. I sat and I did a mock playtest with doing a tier 20 starship against the tier 20 Godzilla, and it was great. It was really great.
So who won, the Starship or Godzilla?
Oh, Godzilla won. It was so it's kind of weird because like the way that it works out is that you don't really want to stay far away from Godzilla because he's going to shoot you with his photon atomic blast. But you also don't want to get close to Godzilla because then he's just going to bite you. So after a certain point, it's just like, what is the safe area around Godzilla? And I think you need like really long range weapons, which I didn't build the ship to have. So maybe I should have done it again with like actual like long range weapons instead of just medium. But Godzilla and his plasma breath were pretty scary. The starship had to flee. It definitely did it.
Okay. And,
Nice.
now, on behalf of the No Direction Network, I want to shout out to Stellar, which will be coming out shortly, everyone. It will be coming out
so
soon, which includes... Stellar will be our Starfinder actual play podcast, which includes everybody here except for Lou. Lou's not part of Stellar, but
Sorry, Lou.
I'm sorry, Lou. But all the normal cast of No Direction Beyond is a part of Stellar, as well as, of course, Lauren from the network, as better known as Dear Dova Queen, who also plays Lily on Adventurous, a fan favorite. And, of course, Amanda Hammond from Paizo, who plays the Rage Bug, which is like a hillbilly bug monster barbarian that is scary and terrible.
You all are Southern. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. You're the
one of
only one without a Southern accent, Alex.
I am the least Southern of everybody.
I mean, there is definitely a sliding scale of Southern, and it's like Parham on the bottom because Parham is actually Southern and knows how to do it right. And then you have Lauren, who has a very good Ash impression, which sells it. And then you have, on top of that, is Amanda, which sounds like what someone from the West Coast thinks a Southerner works like, and it works because she's an alien space bug. And then on top of that is you, who are the least Southern of the group. And then I just don't even try. I'm just like, no, this is my thing. You could tell me because you could tell it's Shivi talking because it's the only one who doesn't sound like he's from Kentucky.
And this
Kentucky's a fine place. You take that back.
I never said it wasn't. I just said Shivi doesn't sound like he's from there.
Yeah, so if you want to check out Stellar, it will be posted soon-ish on the No Direction main feed as well as its own independent feeds because all the shows are getting their independent feeds here very shortly. In time for us to put out 40-some podcasts about PaizoCon, the seminars, we've been diligently working, so you have that to look forward to. And of course, all of this is possible thanks to our Patreon backers. Thank you all who support the network on Patreon. It is only through your support that we are able to have expanded the network as far as we have. We would never have even tried to do Actual Play Podcast or Stellar without your support, and it is appreciated. If you would like to support the network and help us grow and continue to make more content just like this, you can do so by clicking on the Patreon link at nodirectionpodcast.com or going to patreon.com/nodirection. Also, if you want to be a part of the most chill community in Paizo's fandom, you can do so at the No Direction Discord, which you can find with the Discord button at nodirectionpodcast.com. Alex, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Yep. So, Lou, last question before we go. You ready? Ready? Number 1, can I play a Skittermander in Grimmer Space? And number 2, how are the Grimmers going to react to my fuzzy 6-armed ball of cuteness if I do?
Well,
yes. The pause is great.
The answer is yes.
Okay.
Because if you choose to play the aspect of the connection between the two galaxies, anything that's in the default Starfinder role-playing game can be Ravenlofted over to Grimmer Space. And I think the answer is suspicious.
I would accept that.
Because in the Grimmer Space world, anything really cute is too good to be true. So there's got to be something wrong with it. Like, if Tribbles showed up in the Grimmer Space world, they would probably suck your blood while you slept.
Oh.
So or something horrible. And so they'll look at those wonderful little Skittermanders and be like, keep your gun close and your tactical knife closer.
All right, everyone. With that, we're run out of time. We're gonna call this episode. Thank you very much, Lou, for joining us.
Happy to be here, Jay. Thank you so much for having us.
And until next time, go beyond with No Direction.